Hello, it's Tuesday. Welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Udan. New opportunities and strategy in growing the nation's economy, particularly with the 2019 Finance Act that will, among other things, strengthen small and medium enterprises. How? You'll get to know in the second leg of the program tonight. The eco currency has dominated major international discourse with debates either for or against. The line of argument is based on derivable gains of the eco currency, especially for English-speaking countries of the ECOWAS sub-region that include Nigeria, West Africa's region's economic powerhouse that has put up stiff resistance to the ECO. These, many believe, might not be unconnected to accessions to gray areas in relation to the introduction of the ECO. There are held stance that the eco currency decision is more political than economic. Already, 8 West African countries, including Benin Republic, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Togo, had agreed to change the name of their common currency to the ECO, thereby effectively severing relations with the CFA francs links with former colonial master France. Last week, Thursday, ministers of finance and governors of the central banks of ECOWAS member states in the West African Monetary Zone had, at a meeting in Abuja, kicked against the renaming of the CFA to ECO. The launch is slated for July this year. How feasible? Tonight, our guest will sustain the discussion that is coming up on the heels of the UK-Africa Investment Summit ongoing in London, where President Muhammadu Buhari is driving home Nigeria's economic strides and potentials for investment. First, this background report put together by Chimaobi Walter Naji.
The discourse to float a single currency as a legal tender within the ECOWAS region has been on for more than 2 years. But beyond using the initiative as a form of regional integration, the eco currency, when approved, will not only facilitate trade and price stability among trading partners, but serve as a third force in the foreign exchange market to build a strong currency to compete favorably with other currencies of the world.
But as these achievements are exciting, the prospects for the currency future in 2020, viewed in terms of macroeconomic stability and convergence, is to say the least rather uncertain. This reasoning is predicated on the seemingly intractable challenge of member countries' failure to satisfy the convergence criteria.
Sometime in December 2019, the media space was greeted with news of the pronouncement by 8 member nations of the French-speaking part of ECOWAS on the adoption and subsequent change of their currency name from CFA francs to ECO by the year 2020. Now, this decision formed the basis of a discourse at this extraordinary meeting of the Ministers of Finance and the Governors of Central Banks of the West African Monetary Zone on the ECOWAS single currency program. Now, the meeting, among other things, condemned the action, stating that it is not in line with the decisions of the authority of heads of state and government of ECOWAS for the adoption of the ECO as the name of an independent single currency.
WAM's Convergence Council reiterates the importance for all ECOWAS member countries to adhere to the decisions of the ECOWAS authority heads of states and government towards the implementation of the revised roadmap of the ECOWAS single currency program.
The WAM's Convergence Council, in a communique, recommends that an extraordinary summit of the authority of heads of states and government of the WAM's member states be convened soon to discuss the matter and other related issues. In Abuja, I'm Chimaobi Walter Naji, NTA News.
These reports set the tone for the program tonight, but you get to meet my guests after a couple of reports that will be taken back to back, starting with Lagos.
The decision reached by some Franco countries under the aegis of West African Economic and Monetary Union to adopt a new common currency as against CFA this year did not all go well with the Anglophone countries, which Nigeria is a member. The need for the West African sub-region to urgently resolve issues bordering on convergence criteria, trade relations and economic integration, analysts emphasized, remains crucial to any other policy. Introducing policies that will foster trade liberalization and economic development of the regions, they say, is paramount to the adoption of a common currency.
Well, there is no reason on earth why France as a country commanding the Francophone countries in West Africa should be dictating terms to us as to how we should have a common currency within the West African sub-region. That should not be acceptable. Like I said, if Nigeria accounts for almost half of everything that matters within the West African sub-region, then why should an external party from somewhere dictate terms and conditions under which we should have economic cooperation, economic integration, common currency? That should not be acceptable to us.
They submitted that with Nigeria having over 40% of population and 50% of trade volume in GDP size in the West African region, the country cannot be turned into a dumping site. In Lagos, Abolade Salami, NTA News.
Next on the line of reports is the one from Maiduguri.
The idea of a common currency for the West African region was first mooted almost 30 years ago with the hope of boosting cross-border trade and economic development, and the currency will be based on a flexible exchange rate regime coupled with a monetary policy framework focused on inflation targeting. The 6 member countries of the West African Monetary Zone comprising Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone have rejected the adoption of ECO as the name for the proposed single currency for West Africa, saying it is not in line with what was agreed for the adoption, which Nigeria accounts for 2/3 of the region's economy.
The problem with eco-currency is the Francophone states had already CFA. So now the CFA had already unilaterally accepted the eco as their own, unilaterally without consulting Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and then Gambia. So in a situation where they unilaterally declared the utilization of eco without consulting the English-speaking countries, it amounts to some sorts of breach of trusts in terms of agreement that we already had.
These experts say will be difficult for Chad, Niger, and other French-speaking countries to come to Nigeria and buy goods, as the ECO is going to be controlled by French and the monetary policy is determined by the European Central Bank.
And if you do a single currency, the tendency is that the weaker economies within the ecosystem will be leaning very heavily on the big economies such as Nigeria, Ghana, and maybe Cote d'Ivoire. So these ones will impact negatively on our business and business people.
Others, on the other hand, are of the opinion that it is of advantage to Nigeria as the country has diverse products that are locally in tune with West African sub-region, thereby operating cultured commercial venture, and its advantage will be based on factors of demand and supply of its products.
If Nigeria is staged within the midst of those West African countries, it is a very big advantage to Nigeria because we have the products. Therefore, we will attract most of the West African common currency towards Nigeria.
He further explained that if the eco currency is adopted, there will be cost effectiveness as attendant extra currency exchange costs and risk will be eliminated. In Maiduguri, Yagum Subukar, NTA News.
Yet another one from Calabar.
The talk towards achieving a joint single currency across West Africa, the region's political and economic union agreed that the rollout will be gradual, with countries meeting the laid out criteria. However, an economist like Professor Agnes Antai of the Economics Department of the University of Calabar says the ECO will, rather than facilitate trade, slow down economic growth processes, especially that of Nigeria.
We may benefit from other countries that are producing cheaper than Nigeria, and things that we are producing more expensive, we can buy from them. and then they buy from us. So with the same currency. So that will lead to maybe some kind of development. We may not gain too much because we are going to be negotiating.
However, the 6 member countries of the West African Monetary Zone, comprising Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, have rejected the adoption of the ECO as the name of the proposed single currency for West Africa. What lies ahead in the coming days for an agreed single currency for all member states is one question that only time can tell. In Calabar, Achibombasi, NTA News.
The eco-currency is sustaining the conversation, and one of the guests there said, if Nigeria is caged, it will be an advantage to Nigeria because Nigeria remains a huge market. The program is Tuesday Live Tonight. You can be part of the conversation through our phone calls and our Twitter handles. Sending your tweets. At some point, the lines will be opened, and our Twitter handle is opened. The Twitter handle is Tuesday Live NTA. Well, we'll also be taking a couple of reports from across our zones, given our huge network and the biggest one in Africa. Well, my guest tonight, I have the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale. Good to have you on the program.
It's always a privilege to be here.
Director, Monetary Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Moses Tule. Welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Professor Ken Ife, Lead Consultant on Private Sector Development to the ECOWAS Commission. He is also Macroeconomic Policy Analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Expert on Regional Economic Integration, Trade Lawyer, ECOWAS Consultant, and President, Nigerian National Association of Nigerian Traders. Good to welcome you to the program, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dominic.
And from our Lagos Network Center, we are the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Muda Yusuf. Good to have you on the program tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you. Once again, gentlemen, welcome to Tuesday Live Tonight. Let me bend backwards a bit. What is the news is UK-Africa Investment Summit ongoing. How strategic is it?
Oh, well, thank you very much for that, Domini. This is extremely important on several levels. On the bilateral level, you have, and I want to focus in obviously on Nigeria and what it is that we stand to gain from this. When you look at the UK-Africa Investment Summit, it's difficult to talk about that without referring to Africa's economic giant, which is our country. And it's very clear from the immediate kind of outcomes of the investment summit. We have seen a series of deals signed in favor of our country, in favor of job creation, between President Muhammadu Buhari's administration and some investors from the United Kingdom. One of them is a deal with a UK-based company called Trilliant, which involves a multi-million-pound deal to supply smart metering to the Abuja electricity distribution company. Obviously, that should have a major multiplying effect on the ability of that distribution company to ensure that we have fairly stable power output in the nation's capital. That's on the one end. On the other end, you have a £315 million agreement between a UK-based energy firm called Savannah Energy and in Nigeria that will see them acquire again about £315 million worth of assets in the oil and gas sector. That is at the first tranche. Obviously, that is going to lead to the upgrade of the facilities that are being purchased. We expect that to have some multiplying effect on revenue generation, obviously in the oil and gas sector. And another one was another deal signed with a UK-based firm called Tex ATC, which is going to be a multi-million-pound agreement, which is going to see them build air traffic control towers across the country. These are just the immediate deals. I think what's really important and what I want our people to understand this evening is President Muhammadu Buhari is in this for the long haul. He's not just looking at the immediate dividends or the immediate deals. He's looking at how he can position the country to reap much larger dividends as we go down the road. And what I want to be very specific about in terms of how Mr. President is going about doing that is that in 2015, Mr. President was made the head of the Commonwealth Economic Investment Enterprise and Investment Council, EIC. Now, essentially, that council within the Commonwealth of Nations is tasked with encouraging intra-Commonwealth trade and investment. Now, what is important right now is that we are at a point in history when the United Kingdom, and Great Britain in particular, is obviously working out their exit now. They secured their deal to exit the European Union. Now, what that means is now the Commonwealth's largest economy is now free from the kind of economic ring fencing that has for a very long time been occurring, because when the United Kingdom was in the Eurozone and in agreement with the European Union, there were several tariffs across multiple sectors that would limit trade between the United Kingdom and countries that are not in the Eurozone. That is no longer going to be a factor, which means that you're going to have more bilateral agreements between the United Kingdom and countries like Nigeria. You're going to have more deals and more agreements between the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth countries. And Mr. President was very clear in his remarks that that council, the Enterprise and Investment Council, which he leads, is going to now have new vitality, a jolt of fresh life because of what is happening with Brexit. So we can expect a scenario in which Commonwealth nations such as Great Britain, Canada, and Australia are going to be more economically synergized with other Commonwealth countries. And then the last point I would like to make very quickly is that we all benefit from being states that have laws that align obviously under English jurisprudence, which means that we can more effectively align our regulations and our laws to effectively expedite and enhance trade and investment between the Commonwealth nations. So Mr. President is taking the lead on that amongst the Commonwealth nations, and that's a big reason why of all the African heads of state at the UK Africa Investment Summit, it was President Muhammadu Buhari solely that was invited for a one-on-one meeting with Prince Charles, as obviously a leader of the Commonwealth, to work out some of these issues. So Mr. President's focused on the short term, the medium term, and the long term in terms of what is going to be an expansive trade and investment relationship between the United Kingdom and the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Okay. Dr. Tule, job creation, yes. More investments, yes. Economic growth, yes. And within the agricultural value chain, a lot of prospects. But some view this as one strategy to cage Nigeria once again. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think we need to very clearly redefine the narrative here, which is that how strategic is this summit? The strategic importance of this summit is more in favor of the UK. The UK is going to lose a big market in Europe, and it needs an alternative market. And the fact that there is a Commonwealth of Nations which could become, perhaps in the future, some trading bloc, perhaps the world's biggest trading bloc it could be, if it graduates to that level. But then the UK suddenly remembers that it's got African nations there that were once colonies to the UK. So that gives them the impetus to pursue Brexit, knowing that without Britain's presence in Europe, Britain has a large market outside Europe. So first of all, it's a face-saving summit for the UK to tell you that, look, you guys, I'm back here. We can have a deal. And I think fortunately for the UK, where they left African nations to go and have a marriage with Europe several years ago, they came back and they still met those countries there, especially Nigeria. In terms of level of development, in terms of level of advancement, we haven't advanced much since they left us. I do not agree that it's kind of recolonization. We may not have a very strong basis for discussions or for negotiations with the UK, because when it comes to negotiations and striking deals, definitely they have the expertise better than we do. But certainly, in terms of developing some small industries, I'm not talking of high-tech industries. Of course, we can benefit, and then they can provide not just the market, but employment opportunities for British citizens outside the UK. So that's good for the UK. Now, to the extent that they're going to have some maybe £100 million investment, £200 million, £50 investment in some sectors here and there in certain countries. To that extent, you can say that those countries receiving those investments would benefit to the extent of that investment. But how large the UK is going to expose itself is going to be determined by the investment climate in most of the countries to where this investment is going to flow. And that is where we can then speak about Nigeria. What is Nigeria's investment climate? Is it so clement as to attract investment from the UK or from other countries, from Canada, from Australia? And that is what Nigeria has to work at. Look at investment climate between a couple of African countries. If you take Ghana, if you take Ethiopia, if you take Rwanda, if you take South Africa, certainly we can't match up to these countries in terms of the clemency of the investment climate that can attract investment to those countries. So we have to be really, really up and doing. And I think my friend has a lot of work to do in that regard. If you have the president's ears, then this is the time you need to really let the president know that we must, as a country, improve our investment. There are no two ways about it. Okay. If Nigeria is going to gain, we must work on that.
Okay, Prof, moving forward, give, take. People will expect it to be a win-lose drive, but we are looking towards a direction where we have a win-win drive. What's your take?
It has to be a win-win, and it is going to be a win-win.
Okay.
First, this is a unique opportunity for Nigeria. You remember Nigeria didn't sign EU Economic Partnership Agreement. We didn't sign it, and we have no apologies to offer for not signing it. By the way, it was more around trading goods. They haven't even started talking about the trading services. Mm-hmm. Then, even with the Africa AfCFTA we have signed, what is on the table is really about trading goods. When we now go into force, then we'll start talking about negotiating on trading services. But with UK, Nigeria has a very unique position, and we have something on the table. First, we have, in terms of trading goods, we have our oil, we have our gas, we have our mineral resources, and they have all the seismic drawings and 2 or 3D in London, because they were our colonial master. They have they know where everything is in Nigeria, all the mining minerals and all that. But if we can get comfort from a guaranteed deal on purchase of our oil and gas, that will give us some macroeconomic space. Because every day we are juggling with where we buy oil, where we sell oil and all that stuff. But if we can have, America let us down on the AGOA. They're no longer buying our oil. So it's very important for us that we can secure a deal there, and then we can have that breathing space. But on the other hand, London has the city. The city is one of the biggest financial markets in the world. And over $1 trillion of transactions are flying through the city every day. So all these are requests for, we have a long list of infrastructure that we need to finance. London can sort all that out for us. It's easy, they can sort it out. And they have more flexibility on what they could do when they have the guarantees that our sovereign guarantee, they could be much more flexible in what they could do with it. Now, so whilst on one hand, that is a win for them, for have their investments, but also a win for us to have the financing that we need for our infrastructure. And also, we have education. We have over 1 million Nigerians in London, more than the rest of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa put together. So we have the biggest population of black in there in London, which means it's a strategic asset for us. Don't forget that diaspora brings in $25–26 billion every year. And we have so much we can do when you look at national savings schemes and all of that, and how that money can diffuse into some of our financial markets. There is leverage. Even a mortgage market, there is leverage there. So we can talk about education. We are one of the biggest number of people trained in UK every day. We can talk about health, banks. We have some of our banks in UK. We have Nollywood. We have so many services areas, aviation. All the services area will form the backbone of a comprehensive trade in services and trade in goods negotiation, solid negotiation. So I would say, and South Africa is heading in that direction. South Africa had a bilateral agreement with EU. We didn't, and we couldn't, because in 2003, we didn't opt out. We went into the negotiation. Now it's too late. We can't come out and say to EU, I already have one. We can't. So this is the thing. We just have to pursue the foreign policy that is saying Nigeria first. This is the first test case for Nigeria first. Go and sort a deal, cut a solid deal, and you can have that template to show to all these other the continents that are coming to us, and we can make a good deal of it.
All right. Now, I'm happy that we have thrown it open. The SSC has talked about the government position. Dr. Tule has talked about the fears, and you have given us the picture where we can have it a win-win. Let's proceed. Ken, eco-currency, what is the status?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure you're going to permit me to perhaps draw a footnote.
Briefly.
In a brief manner on the subject of Nigeria-UK investments and relationship. I think I want to agree with my immediate colleague here who talked about the relationship being a win-win. I totally agree with that. Now, we must also look at it from the angle of the fact that we had an EPA where UK was a member of Europe, and now it is no longer there. And here we are. There is no way that UK would not want to continue a trade relationship with Nigeria, with Africa. And the first point of call, where the market is, where the attraction is, where a good bride is Nigeria. Now, looking at that from that angle, what we must begin to look at right now is, one, to ensure that we come up to any kind of negotiation from a very strong background. And what is that position of strength? One, don't lose sight of the fact that United Kingdom is like an orphan, courtesy of Brexit. Now, orphan in quote. And therefore, it would want to have some more brothers and sisters. It wants to have some shares in the marketplace. Africa presents herself with 1.2 billion. So we need to get into that. Number two is that we need to also prepare ourselves towards that negotiation to ensure that we have all that it takes at home in terms of the environment, business environment, in terms of the capacity to even accept and consummate such investments. In terms of architecture, the framework, in terms of legislative and legal framework that will receive that, and in terms of security as well. In terms of policy, where is the trade policy? In terms of assurance that this investment will be secured and totally secured. And these are areas I feel. And then finally, in terms of the fact that the private sector, because government does not do business, every negotiation is being done for the sake of the private sector. So therefore, you need to prepare the private sector who will consummate such implementation of the architecture. And that is very key. And I think we need to move. Now,
before you go to ECO, I want to go back to Dr. Tule. Apparently, maybe based on your views, Ken's views, and Jury's view, given the fears of his worry about capacity, Nigeria put on hold the issue of EPA on the grounds of violation of the World Trade Organization Treaty. I don't know whether he has a different view before we move on. Briefly.
Now, why Nigeria did not sign the Economic Partnership Agreement, it has turned out to be good for the country because we were not prepared and we did not even understand what it was all about. You'll recall that the EPA was a product of the EU, which they put together after the failure to convince the developing world in Mexico at the meeting in Cancun. They put together and sold on a piecemeal basis the EPA to countries, visiting them and selling them. In West Africa, all the countries signed except Nigeria and the Gambia. Now, 30 years down the line after signing the EPA, 80% of your trade has to be with the EU. Those were the terms in the EPA. Now, good enough, Nigeria, it simply meant that if you could import a product from any other country or from any other region of the world cheaper, 80% of your trade must be with the EU. Now it was good we didn't sign. And now it's kind of a saving grace for the rest of ECOWAS. And I still repeat, we need to put in place the enabling environment. Let me just touch briefly on what Prof just said about investment in oil.
But time is very tight.
Let me tell you, in the EU, there is total agreement by 2030. No vehicle in the EU is going to use fossil fuels. No vehicle in the EU. So 10 years to 2030, you don't expect the UK to go and invest heavily in oil. So we must be looking at the future beyond oil. We can't be talking of oil today. We must be looking at the future beyond oil.
Just a minute. Because I need to respond. You respond. Just hold on. Let's go to ECO now. You respond.
All right, thank you very much. Where do I start? The background is that, of course, it's no longer news that the heads of states, the authority of heads of states and governments of West Africa met on the 21st of December in Abuja and approved the ECO currency as was recommended by the Council of Ministers, which deliberated on the experts meeting that held for almost a week in Conakry and then passed on to the council. And the council which met on the 20th looked at it and approved. And if you look at the contents of what the heads of states approved in their communique, paragraphs 13 to 18, which dealt with the ECO. One is the symbol of the ECO. Two is the creation of a Central Bank of West Africa that will be in charge. Three is the name, of course. And then four is that member countries should continue the process of negotiation and, in fact, put some fast-track actions towards the convergence criteria. And I think that was the last point in paragraph 18. Now, just on that day, about that day, you also discovered that President Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, who is also the chairman of UEMOA, the 8 member countries of, the Francophone in West Africa, side by side with Emmanuel Macron, President of France, sat down to announce that the Francophone ECOWAS countries, the Francophone West African countries, have adopted ECO, the same ECO, as a replacement for CFA, the France CFA. Now, there was some confusion. The next we had, just 2 days or so, was from Ghana, that came up with a press release saying that they support that move, and in fact encouraged member states to follow suit. Again, few weeks later, just about 3 days thereafter, we had Nigeria Minister of Finance now came up with a statement that Nigeria was studying the situation and would come out with its, her own position in due course. And then about a week or so later, had the meeting of the WAMS, the West African Monetary Zone, which met, and they appeared to be kicking against the pronouncement and adoption of ECO, the same ECO that was adopted by ECOWAS by now the Francophone West African UEMOA countries. That's the situation now. And they are also imploring the heads of states, the ECOWAS heads of state, to meet over the matter for a clearer interpretation of their, their adoption, their pronouncement, and their resolution.
Okay,
so that
let me just hold you there so far. Thank you. Now, let's go to Lagos, where Muda Yusuf is waiting. Now, give and take. There is a paradigm shift within the ECOWAS African sub-region. Clearly, if all these grey areas are cleared, how ready is the Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria ready to fit in? Are you set?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, if you permit me, before I comment on the ECO currency, let me just briefly also comment on the issue of attracting foreign investment within the context of the UK African Summit. Let me say that the best way to attract investment into this country is to ensure that those who are already investors in this economy are doing well. In other words, charity must begin at home. That is why I want to support the idea of Tule, that we need to focus very seriously and more importantly on the issue of the investment climate. If you are talking about trade and things like that, trade is a two-way thing. It's about import, it's also about export. One of the panelists have talked about the fact that Nigeria is a large market and therefore is very attractive. But it's not just about providing a market for people to bring in goods here. It's also about putting something on the table in the global market. The percentage of our foreign exchange earnings now from oil and gas is almost over 90%. The non-oil sector is accounting for less than 10% of our exports. And it is in the non-oil sector that you can build an economy that is inclusive, that can actually impact the lives of the people. So I want us to get our priorities right. It is business people that do business. It is not the government. So, and it is what the business people see on the ground. That is what we bring them to come and invest here. So having said that, let me go to the issue of the ECO currency. The whole idea of the ECO currency is to ensure that we improve on the payment system. And I must say that the payment system and the common currency issue is the least of our problem as far as economic integration is concerned. The greatest problem to economic integration as we speak is the problem of what we call the non-tariff barriers. You need to speak to investors who are trading across the sub-region. It's a nightmare taking goods across the sub-region because of issues of the multiple agencies, issues of extortion, issues of all sorts of fees, and all of that. So there's still a whole lot of problems that we need to deal with. There's also the problem of the connectivity. You can't trade if you are not properly connected, either in terms of roads, in terms of the rail system, or in terms of the sea. That connectivity is not there. Then there's also the issue of compliance, even with the current levels of protocols that we have in ECOWAS. It is the compliance problem that led to the closure of the border. We have protocols that we have signed. The level of compliance is very weak across the entire sub-region. So we have to sequence and know what our priorities should be as far as economic integration is concerned. The issue of the monetary union is about the first level of economic integration. We have the free trade area, which is the first level, and the main anchor of this is the ETLS. We have the customs union, which is the next level, and we have the common market, which follows that. Then we talk about the monetary union. We have not been able to perfect or even improve properly the first three stages of economic integration. We are talking about a common currency. So for me, we need to get our priorities right. We need to fix the challenges of the lower levels of economic integration. I'm talking about the free trade area, the customs union, the common market, and we also need to address the issue of security. These are more fundamental issues than the issue of the ECO. The ECO is the least of our problem. Payment system, because of the sophistication in the financial system, payment system is not so much a big issue. You can sit in your bedroom and do transactions in any currency around the world with the kind of financial system and the globalization around financial markets that we have now. So that is my view. As for the readiness of the chamber, of course we are ready, but the environment has to be right before you can get businesses to key in into whatever opportunities exist in the area of economic integration.
Okay, before I come to a jury, let me take on Professor Kenefi. But before now, our focus on the first leg tonight is on the eco-currency sustaining the conversation. The phone lines will be displayed. Our Twitter handle is open. In a couple of minutes, we'll take tweets sent in by our viewers across the world. Now, given the argument put out by Moda from Lagos, coming back to back Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari's fears years back before ECO was endorsed, he said there is no need being in a hurry over ECO. But that is aside. With the issues raised now, are you saying we should relapse or continue?
There are two sides to it.
Absolutely.
It depends on the state of readiness and when we think the conditions are right. But if you don't think the conditions are right, it will be suicide for us to jump in. The reason is, first of all, in the last meeting, issues were raised about other convergence criteria, which is how much, if this is about trade, this currency is about trade, how much of the trade is going on now? Because we seem to be on a receiving end, where Nigeria is complaining that is what we are getting is restriction of our goods going across, and then you have dumping of goods in our country. You have what's it called, smuggling and a lot of trafficking in drugs and all that, and all of them have repercussion for the intensification of the criminal crisis we have in all the geopolitical zones. And then, of course, there's the second political condition, that if you don't have peace, you can have trade, you can have development. So let's address this issue of cross-border conflict and all this whole terrorism, cross-border terrorism, if you really know that we want to. But we have been working on this because, you know, to some extent I sympathize with the Francophones, because they've been in the wings waiting for this 2020. And it will be unfair for us to walk away from. They are celebrating a major step in their economic independence. They've been waiting for this 2020 for them to begin to gain back control of their economy. So you can't say to them whatever it is that they did to to achieve that, you shouldn't bother about that. We on the WAMSI zone, we have been sleeping on the timetable. 2003, it didn't happen. In 2005, it didn't happen. 2010, it didn't happen. 2014, it didn't happen. And you want to put it again for 2020. So I'm not saying that we should abandon that. There's no substitute. We have to meet the macroeconomic convergence criteria for us to actually take that risk. And the Nigerians' position must be very, very clear. Our position has to be clear because we are the biggest economy, we have the biggest reserve, we have the biggest to lose.
Okay, let me just follow
you.
Our first caller tonight.
Conditions are right.
Okay, our first caller tonight is calling in from Owerri, Imo State. Divine. Abia State, I beg your pardon. Hello, Divine. We lost that call. But on Dr. Tule, a couple of tweets have come in. Titus Baba says, eco currency is a scam. Deep thought needed. What is the advantage and disadvantage of the eco common currency on our economy? Can you react to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Eco currency is not a scam. Let me explain. The journey started in 1975 with the adoption of the ECOWAS EMCP, ECOWAS Monetary Cooperation Program. In year 2000, President Obasanjo in Lomé called a meeting of the English-speaking countries plus Guinea, which eventually they formed the WAMSI zone, West African Monetary Zone, which was referred to as the second West African Monetary Zone. The expectation was that by 2003, the English-speaking countries plus Guinea would have a common currency to join together with the UMOA countries at a later date. Now, that did not happen in 2003. The date was shifted to 2005. Again, this group of countries failed to achieve convergence and meet. 2010 they did. In 2015 they did not. Then the ECOWAS heads of state then agreed that, look, since the WAMSI countries have not been able to achieve macroeconomic convergence and achieve a common currency, then let us by 2000, let us merge the two-track approach of the WAMSI countries having a currency and merging with the UMR countries at a later date into a single program. And then they initiated the Presidential Task Force Initiative under the leadership of the President of Niger, President Yusufo, and the President of Ghana to lead the process. Now, in the process, in the course of negotiations and discussions, Nigeria put on the table solid issues which the ECOWAS countries ignored. They didn't take them into account. We pulled out of that process. Because we pulled out of that process, the fact the entire process was going to be in jeopardy, then they brought in Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire to be co-members of the Presidential Task Force, meaning 4 people now. Then we were forced to begin to attend the meetings. The position we have adopted ever since we came on board remains the same. The same position we had put on the table is the same position we are putting on the table now. That unless you meet the convergence criteria, you cannot have a common currency. What are the convergence criteria? There were 6 in number. But they say, okay, look, there are too many. Reduce them. We reduce the primary criteria to 4 and the secondary criteria to 4.
6.
That is, we downgraded them. We downgraded them. And even after downgrading them, none of the countries has been able to meet on a consistent basis all the criteria. In December 2015, the ECOWAS heads of state met and passed resolution. They passed the revised amendment, an act of the ECOWAS heads of state summit that for the 2020 deadline, all countries that must meet the convergence criteria must meet it on a consistent basis, back to back, over a 3-year period, up to December 2019, which means for any country to become a member of the ECO, you must have complied with all the convergence criteria consistently. We had agreed already on what is the nature of the central bank, and we agreed it was going to be a federal structure of the central bank. We agreed on the monetary policy framework, which was going to be anchored by flexible exchange rate.
Okay.
We agreed.
Sorry, please. We are quite loaded. You will land. We have a couple of reports just to sustain the conversation, like we said. We have reports coming in from Enugu, Aba, Katsina, Kano. Let's just take them, then we'll continue the conversation, please.
Of French colonial currency, the CFA franc, the West African Economic and Monetary Union were hoping to see a new common currency, the ECO currency, in place. The Anglophone ECOWAS nations of Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, along with Guinea, comprising the West African Monetary Zone, met in Abuja for crunch talks over the adoption of the ECO currency and issued a communique condemning the decision to unilaterally rename the CFA franc. Some respondents in Enugu were, however, of the view that if actually in the original spirit the ECO currency was conceptualized without the recent underspinning from France, it would have indeed boosted the economy of the West African sub-region and facilitate trade.
Generally speaking, the idea is good. It's meant to promote trade and economic relationship and to deepen that within West African countries.
If we have a common currency, it will make trade very easy. It will strengthen the economy of West Africa, and that currency can now gain more ground in international market.
They were, however, of the view that Nigeria adopting the ECO currency at this time would result to the devaluation of Naira, whittling of the economy, and would make the Central Bank of Nigeria to lose the power to adjust the interest rates.
If we sign into ECO the way it is today, it will ruin our economy. It would devalue the Naira. It will reduce the potency of our productive level.
It is, however, the views of many that Nigeria should not give up its national currency, the Naira, as it is often seen as the likely anchor currency for ECOWAS.
Financial experts are of the opinion that the discussion on eco-currency should be sustained and there should be more inclusion of technocrats and other key players of various business communities in the country. For the discussion to have meaningful and fruitful import, as they observe that as population determines consumption, Nigeria provides a ready market in the sub-region, hence the need to negotiate from the point of strength by dwelling on those factors that may slow down businesses and other investment policies.
It's something that will create fears in the minds of traders. How do you exchange this eco currency to your own local currency? For instance, you are coming from Cameroon to buy goods in Aba, and you come with eco currency. The Aba trader is not well known in the usage of that eco currency. At what rate can he exchange eco currency to Naira?
Before you can reach a consensus on this, you must have agreed that yes, we are in a position to benefit that, before you can, commit to that.
Issues bordering on exchange rates, national bank policies, inflation, border and tariff should be highlighted as factors that may endanger the idea, at the same time hampering businesses and development.
What are the conditions? What is 1 Naira to 1 ECO?
People would like to find out the effect first. They wouldn't rush to sell with eco currency, I must tell you.
They want adequate awareness on the acceptability of the regional currency by the Aba business community.
Let's take another one from Katsina.
The proposed name for the common currency that the West African Monetary Zone plans to introduce in the framework of Economic Community of the West African States. However, on January 16, the year 2020, Nigeria and other West African countries, notably the English-speaking ones, denounced the decision to replace CFA by the ECO, saying that it was not in conformity with the program recently adopted by the entire region to establish a single currency. This followed an announcement by the Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara that sometimes this year, West African CFA used in former French colonies would be replaced with a new currency called ECO. However, with the attached criteria to be fulfilled by the member countries for the establishment of ECO currency, economists in Katsina said if implemented, it will affect business activities and slow down its development in the sub-region.
Do you think France will be ready to allow 50% of the foreign reserves of 8 countries in West Africa to be withdrawn?
The unfortunate circumstance was behind the French-speaking countries. They felt ECO, the tag name of the currency should be changed to ECO, which actually shows the pragmatic nature of Africa.
They express fear that the implementation of ECO currency will affect exchange rate, reduce economic well-being of the member state due to uncertainty, as well as a fall in macroeconomic stability.
Any place you want to go, you can use our currency and go there and do your business.
Kano, as commercial nerve center of West Africa, stands better chance of benefiting from the single currency. Records available show that between 50 and 100 people from the Niger Republic and Cameroon transact various businesses daily in the state. Therefore, Kano will serve as a melting point for the integration of the economy of West Africa. These can be achieved with greater commitment by Nigeria and her Francophone-speaking neighbors.
It is a very good initiative. It will ease trade. You know, one of the barriers of trade is difference in currency. So at least in this era when the federal government is trying to promote intra-African trade, you know, the main problem we had was all the countries in Africa were aiming to trade with Europe, with America, with Asia, and so on and so forth. The trade among African countries, they said, is less than 20%.
The common currency issue, special benefit is you are saved the cost of exchange rates and the sudden fluctuations. You are going to be saved. As long as you have the same currency, it is the same currency.
Other issue raised by stakeholders is that member states should be left alone to handle the currency without interference by the Anglophone. Muhammad Rabiu Ali, NTA News.
That report from Kano links us to the Vox Pop by Nigerians. Tuesday Live is an audience participatory program. Let's take a listen to Nigerians.
I know it's basically for Francophone countries, which Nigeria is not part of. But I also heard that it's going to affect most West African countries. So in that case, Nigeria could be a part of it. But I've not really studied the economics behind it.
I believe Nigeria being a part of ECOWAS should not be exempted from this ECO currency thing, you know, because when we talk about ECOWAS, Nigeria is part of it. So we should also join the other ones, in spite of the fact that we are not colonized by France.
To me, I think it's ECO currency, well and fine. It's good because economically to unify the sub-region of West Africa. But where I have my own problem is that we should make sure that the integrity of our Naira is maintained. Because if we're not talking of, if we talk of ECO, currency of ECO, this should be used by all, West African countries. The question now is this: will it take care of all the peculiarities of the states? To me, it's okay because it will actually facilitate commerce, it will facilitate economic activities and things of this nature. But we should make sure that the integrity of the Naira is not compromised. Because one ECO, will it be up to, is it equal to 1 Naira? And a lot of things will need to be done so that in the end of it all, the integrity of the Naira is not compromised.
Reactions there by Nigerians, a lot of questions, concerns, and, well, mind-boggling issues. Technocrats to be involved, inflationary issues, integrity of the Naira. Well, Ajuri, let's hear from you. I've kept you silent for too long.
Thank you very much, Omini. I just want to respond to a few issues that have come up over the course of the conversation before I just get into the ECO matter. I think one of the first contributions in response was to the effect that, has Nigeria effectively created the kind of investment climate that can take advantage of bilateral and multilateral opportunities that could arise, such as the UK African Investment Summit. The response is this. I think any unbiased observer who has been watching what has been transpiring in this country over the last 4 years would acknowledge that for the first time in our history, we had been named to the World Bank top 10 most improving nations in the global ease of doing business rankings, and not just once, but twice in the last 4 years. We've moved up approximately 40 spots. It's not just some random ranking or a random placement of Nigeria on that list. It is as a result of very tangible and verifiable adjustments that have been made across branches of government, from the executive to the legislature to the judiciary. And I want to be very precise about what I'm talking about. In the executive branch, we've seen adjustments made within, for example, the Corporate Affairs Commission, which has seen business registration times drop from approximately between 90 and 180 days down to now less than 48 hours in many cases, because of the online the automation of processes, because of the linkages now that were created online between the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Corporate Affairs Commission. That's just on the executive side, and that's not even getting into port reforms and customs automation as well that is keyed into that process. In the legislature, it was in 2017 that this administration oversaw the passage of the Credit Reporting Act and the Asset Registry Act, which essentially has now given insight for business transactors to be able to see what the credit ratings of certain actors within the transaction space is for the first time in our history. The Collateral Registry Act has now allowed for movable assets to be placed in some of the transactions that take place as a form of collateral. These are things that increase confidence in the trade space within the country, in the commercial space. In the judiciary, we have seen tangible reforms in high courts in Kano and Lagos, the two commercial capitals of the country, that has basically seen start to finish times of small claims courts litigation reduced from 6 months down to beneath 60 days as a result of new guidelines that have been put in place by chief judges in those two jurisdictions. These are verifiable, tangible steps that have been taken over the last 4 years that has seen our improvement in the ease of business. Now, that has to do with investment climate. I think if you look at the tangible numbers, look at the financials, and what you're going to see is even in the midst of depressed oil prices, we have seen capital importation, and not just hot money, not just portfolio investment. We're talking about real capital importation of about over, I think, $20 billion in the last year, for example, well over that figure.
Let's go straight to the echo. We don't have all the time right now.
We're excited about the progress. I just need to make one more point before I go into the echo. My friend Muda
time is an issue.
Yes, I know, made the suggestion that obviously that oil and gas exports make up over 90% of our exports, etc. Now, on the face of it, that would appear as if we're not making progress, and that's why I want to be very clear in responding to my good friend, so that our people are not deceived about the fact that before you are able to enhance your exports, right, across sectors, across value chains and goods, you first have to do what? You have to satisfy local demand. We have gone from a situation over decades now where we're importing billions of dollars of goods, food items, you name it, across value chains. We have reduced those import volumes by 85 and 95% over the last 4 years, saving our country well over $25 billion in food products alone. That means that we have gone a ways to satisfy local demand, which will eventually lead us to the kind of export figures we're talking about. So let's be real about the fact that there has been tremendous progress in that regard. Now, to the issue of the echo, it's very important that we break this down. I think we have been talking at a very top level, sophisticated level, in a way that our people may not grasp if they don't fully understand what the issues are. You essentially have two sides of the divide. You have the West African Economic Monetary Union, which is essentially a grouping of the Francophone countries, right, in conjunction with the French government. And then you have the West African Monetary Institute, or the West African Monetary Zone. Now, the West African Monetary Institute, WAMI, made very clear the criteria for convergence of the West African states to all adopt the ECHO, right? We've touched on that a little bit. 4 primary criteria, 6 secondary criteria. Some of the criteria, because none of them have been specified in this conversation, include, and this is why Nigeria has been reluctant to just jump in head first like some of the other countries, include things like there must be single-digit inflation within all member states of the WAMI by the end of each financial year. You have conditions like you must have up to 20% tax to GDP. That means tax revenues are at least 20% of GDP. Right now, Nigeria is barely pushing 6%. Even it's only in like South Africa where you have about 29%. Kenya, I believe, is at about 18%, etc. So West African states have a long way to go to get to that threshold. Now, the issues of convergence have to do with more than just payment systems. If you converge, what you're essentially doing is you have to now yes, very quickly. Yeah, I know. You have to put in legal statutes that would essentially create a brand new central bank, right? Not only will you have a brand new central bank governor, which would oversee this kind of federated system of the ECO, but you would also now need to harmonize all fiscal and monetary regulations and laws between all of the states. We have not come close to that, which means that 2020 is obviously not a viable and feasible time frame. The last point very quickly is that as we move forward, if we are able to federate it and establish the new central bank and go through all of these processes, the question now remains, is every country committed, every country within the West African Monetary Zone, is every country equally committed to ensuring that they are able to achieve the kind of macroeconomic stability within their countries? Are they going to be able to ensure good governance? Are they going to be able to ensure that they spend on infrastructure? Yeah. These are the kinds of issues, because Nigeria is doing it, but not everybody has President Muhammadu Buhari as president.
Thank you so much. Well, we have so little time for this issue. We have two issues tonight, so as much as time allows, we'll take as much as possible. We need to go to Lagos now to take on Muda for concluding thoughts on this issue before we sign on the next issue. What's your concluding thoughts, please?
Well, my concluding thoughts is that we should not be in a hurry to jump into this. This whole discussion about the ECO, as far as I'm concerned, is a distraction. We should deal with the fundamental issues which I've highlighted earlier, which are the key issues that are impeding or constraining trade within the sub-region. So let's get our priorities right, and let's see whatever we can do to ensure that we build a competitive economy. If you have an economy that is competitive, that is strong, the issue of common currency will not matter. If we take the example of the EU, there are quite a number, close to 10 countries in the EU are not in the Eurozone. They are members of the EU, but they are not part of the Euro. I mean, we have countries like UK, we have Sweden, Hungary, Croatia, Bulgaria, and Denmark. They are not doing badly, in spite of the fact they are outside the Euro. And if you look at even economies that are doing very well in terms of trade, take China, for instance, take Japan, take South Korea, quite a number of countries like that, they are not part of any monetary union. So for me, this is a distraction. We should spend less time on it and focus more on the issue of the economy. And I must say that the investment climate is still very challenging. Irrespective of what the World Bank is saying, we still have serious issues with productivity, we have serious issues with power, with roads, with our ports, with regulation, with policies. Let us constantly engage the stakeholders in this economy so that we can fine-tune this. Let us fix our economy and make it a lot more competitive. That is my closing thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It was nice to have you on the program as I sign you off at this time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And back when we return for the second leg of the program, we shall be signing off Dr. Moses Tule, Director of Monetary Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria. Thank you so much for making it on Tuesday Live tonight. We know we didn't give you all the time to exhaust your issues, but we believe on that leg we surely do that. Thank you so much. When we return on the second leg of the program, we shall be looking at